ElectronJS is a framework where you write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and as the output you get a desktop app instead of a website. With a single JavaScript codebase, it allows you to build cross-platform apps that work on Windows, macOS, and Linux. And in this video, we'll be writing some code to build a text editor app where we can save files to our machine or open files that already exist. This app also has some built-in features such as copying and pasting, zooming in and zooming out. And lastly, it's gonna have an about page. Before we write any code, we need to understand a couple of concepts. Now, Electron has a process model, so let's take a look at that in a diagram. There is main process and renderer processes, or renderers for short. Now, the main process controls the lifecycle of the app, and you can think of it like the backend. Each Electron app has only one main process, and it has a Node.js environment, so you can use anything you can imagine in Node.js. On top of Node.js environment, it has the Electron modules, and with the help of them, you have complete operating system access, which means that you can do things like creating windows, reading files, writing files, etc. And we will see how to use those Electron modules later in the video. So what's up with the renderer process? You can think of it as the front end of your app. As the name suggests, it renders the web content and it has a browser environment, so it has access to DOM. Each new window is called a renderer and it has its own process, and when we close the window, it kills that renderer process. So long story short, an Electron app has only one main process but can have multiple renderers. Main process and renderer processes have distinct responsibilities and are not interchangeable, which means that it is not possible to access the Node.js APIs directly from the renderer process, and it is not possible to access the HTML document object model from the main process. The solution for this problem is to use inter-process communication, or IPC for short. There are four patterns that we can see from the documentation. The first pattern is communicating with the main process from the renderer, and to achieve this, there are some methods that we can see. We send events from the renderer process with IPC renderer.send, and listen from the main process with IPC main.on method. The second pattern is similar to the first pattern, but the difference is the main process responds back to the renderer and the methods change. The third pattern is communicating from main process to renderer, and the last pattern is communicating between renderers. In this video, we'll be using pattern 2 and 3, but you can learn how to use pattern 1 and 4 from the docs. It has been explained pretty crisp and clear, so check that out. So with this process model and IPC in mind, we can start to build our application, which is a text editor. First off, create an empty folder and type npm init-y. This will give you the package.json file, and make the entry point to be main.js file, and this indicates where the main process is running. Author, license, and description can be any value in development, but it'll be necessary for packaging, so you might just want to put some info there. To install Electron, type npm install electron --save -dev. Notice how it is a dev dependency, and you might be wondering, if this is dev dependency, then how it'll function in production? And the answer is, when you package your app, it'll come bundled with Electron binary, and it eliminates the need to specify it as a production dependency. Once it has been installed, add a start script that points the main.js file. Let's create the main.js file, which is the entry point to our application, and it runs the main process. Import the app and browser window modules from Electron. Once the app is ready, then we will create a browser window that is 600 to 800, and we will render the index.html file into that window. And the content for now can be just hello world. Now, to start the application, just write npm start. Now we have a basic HTML page and a default menu, which we will override in a second. But before that, let's give the feeling of a text editor, and for that we can use text area. Don't forget to give it an ID that called tags-area. Let's give it a bit styling to make it full height, and since this is not a CSS course, I skip explaining them, but basically we're making the text area full height as well as adding a thin, nice looking scroll bar to the document. You can grab the CSS file from the source code in the description. Now, every time we make a change, we need to stop the server and then restart it manually. To fix this issue, we can use a built-in tool called ElectronMon, and it is like NodeMon. To use it, type npx electronmon dot, and it'll start the main process. And now in our application, we have this feeling of a text editor, and if the content overflows, we have a scroll bar. To make our app feel like a native app, we need to add add a couple of lines of code. So when all windows are closed, the app should quit on Windows and Linux. But on macOS, it actually still works in the background. So we're checking for that with the help of process.platform, and Darwin is for macOS, Win32 is for Windows, and Linux for Linux. And also when we activate the app, it should create a window if there is not any. Now let's overwrite that default menu. I want to keep my code base clean, so I will create a separate file in a function. First, import the app and menu from the Electron and create the function. The function will take the main window as an argument, and in order to build a menu, we can use build from template method, which takes an array of objects. As I said before, we want this app to feel like a native app, so we will write our code depending on that. Now for the menu in macOS, there is something called app menu, so we will add that, and if you are not in Mac, we will skip it. This piece of code looks a bit scary, but if you read it, it is actually pretty self-explanatory, but I will explain these fields anyways. But for now, let's move on to the next one, which is the File tab, where we have exit, open file, and save file options with the shortcuts next to them. It's gonna have two submenu items, which we put it into the submenu array, and each item is gonna have a label, accelerator, which is to show the shortcuts, and for the on-click event, we can add our own custom methods, which we'll do in a little bit. And here again, we're just doing something specific for Mac. Let's add the edit tab. Again, we give a label and submenu array with the objects, and each of them is a different option. Here we can see there is this role field, which is a built-in field into Electron. So for example, the undo role will automatically create an option with the shortcut that is Ctrl-Z, and it'll even add the functionality. The same applies for others as well. Also, the separator puts a divider between options. For the view tab, we can use built-in roles such as reload, force reload, reset zoom, zoom in, zoom out, and toggle full screen. And we just put separators between them. For the window, we can use roles like minimize, zoom, and close. And lastly, for the help tab, we can add about and build more options, and we're gonna handle the click events later. So that was just our template. Now we need to set it. So we'll just say menu.setApplication menu with the menu that we just created, and export the function from this file. In main.js, inside the create window function, we're gonna call the create menu with the main window, and there we go. Now it is the exact same output that we expected. Now let's add open file functionality. On the click event of open file, attach a function called open file with the main window. Create a file called openfile.js, and inside that file, the function will be async and accept the main window as an argument. Now to show a dialog, we can use a module from Electron called dialog that allow users to open file. We read the file content and send it to the renderer process to display it in the text area. I don't know if you have realized, but we're using the third pattern here, where we send data from the main process to the renderer. Now here, the web contents.send method takes first argument as channel name, and you can think of it as the event name. In this case, it is file opened, and next to it, we are sending the data, which is the file content. So far, we have been writing code for the main process, but how are we gonna write code for the renderer process? This is where the renderer.js file comes into play. Now, to fetch this data on the renderer, we can see that we need to use ipcrenderer.on method, but we can't really use it inside the renderer.js file. In the Electron docs, they say you can't use it. It's because of the security risks, and the solution for this is to use a file called preload.js. With the help of Context Bridge API, we are able to expose some privileged APIs to the renderer. So import the context bridge and IPC renderer from the Electron and call expose a main world method. The first argument can be any string value, and the next argument is an object where we can expose APIs. In this case, we want to listen for file opened event and call a callback function once it is fired. So we just expose this file open function to the renderer.js. We need to let the main process be aware of preload file, so we add web preferences by indicating the preload.js file path, and let the index.html file be aware of the renderer.js file. Now to access this file opened method in renderer, we use window.electronapi.fileOpened, which is taking a callback with two arguments, which are event and data. We want to update text area's value with the data, and if we test it out, it should load the selected file into into the text area. With that out of the way, now it is time to add save file logic. In this case, we'll be using pattern 2 for IPC, and here is why. When we press Ctrl S, renderer will say, "Hey main, can you save this file to the user's machine?" Main will save the file and then it will respond back with the path of the saved file. So as we know, we can't use Electron methods from renderer, so we will expose it with the help of preload.js. So this save file function will take the content and send it to the renderer with the channel name being save file, and we're gonna call this if we press Ctrl S or Command S. So we'll just add an event listener. Now let's listen for the save file event on the main with IPC main.handle method, which will call the save file function, and this function will take event and data as arguments, and it'll show a save dialog with a default file name. In the success case, it'll return the file path back to the renderer, and inside the renderer we can grab that file path and show a success alert with that. Now that we have the main functionalities of our app, we can go ahead and add smaller features to it. Let's continue with the menu. When we click the build more button, we want to navigate user to ElectronJS documentation, which we can do with shell module from Electron. Also, when we click to about button, we would like to show an about window. To keep this file a bit clean, I will create a new file called createaboutwindow.js, and it will create a browser window that is 600 to 300, and we will hide the menu bar on this window, and we will load about.html, which we need to create. So this about page can contain anything, but I'll just put my name here. There is one optimization that I almost forgot, which is we need to set the main window to be null once the app quits. And with that, you have just built your first Electron app. To add more features and to package this app, feel free to check out the Electron docs. And if you think this tutorial was helpful, I would like to see that in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you next time.